Kenya's Supreme Court on Monday upheld Deputy President William Ruto's victory in this year's presidential race following a petition filed by his closest challenger Raila Odinga. In an unanimous decision, the judges ruled that Ruto was validly elected. The court ruled that there was no evidence to show that the election was compromised or that the electronic tallying system was tampered with as alleged by the petitioners. The ruling now paves the way for the swearing-in of Ruto as Kenya's fifth president. My colleague Sarah Kimani has more.
The seven-judge bench had 8 issues to consider in determining whether to nullify or uphold the election of William Ruto. This follows a petition filed by former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, who was also presidential candidate, as well as 8 other petitioners. The issues included the verifiability, security and transparency of the electronic identifying and tallying system, whether the winning candidate met the threshold of 50% plus 1 of the votes cast, whether the divisions in the Electoral Commission affected the final outcome of the presidential race, and whether any illegalities or irregularities in the electoral process warranted the nullification of the elections. The findings of the court.
As a consequence, we declare the election of the first respondent as president-elect to be varied under Article 143 of the Constitution. This being a matter cutting across the public interest, we order that each party do bear their own costs. It is so ordered. And finally, the court has asked me to also acknowledge, although we'll do it in the long draft, the enormous contribution made by counsel in these proceedings, and also the orderly way the council, all the advocates and parties conducted themselves. They remained seated throughout the proceedings. That is the judgment of the court.
The reactions swift.
I want to say without a fear of contradiction that we do not agree with the decision of the Supreme Court. Like Al Gore, I will say we accept the decision, but we do not agree with it.
The time for court cases has ended. The time to assemble a new team has now started. We now move forward as one country and as one people.
Odinga, in a statement, disagreed with the ruling but urged his supporters to remain calm. President-elect William Ruto welcomed the ruling and pledged to work towards uniting the deeply divided nation.
They have not only voted for me, but they have opened doors and gates for their own children in every village, in every neighborhood, knowing very well that their children as well can become leaders. And every child is free to dream, and every child is free to aspire.
Macharia Munene is Professor of History and International Relations at the United States International University in Nairobi, Kenya. He joins us now for the latest. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us, Professor. Let's just first start with this landmark ruling. And I say landmark given the outcome of the challenge to the election results in the last election, but the fact that bar all cynicism, William Ruto has appeared, victorious. Is this a watershed moment in your view?
Well, it is an important decision, and yes, it is watershed in the sense that it marks a transition from one perception to another. The fact that he has had a struggle to come to where he is right now, and the unanimous decision by the judges that he indeed is the elected person is important to the country. It is a relief to a lot of people who are worried that the court might decide to have a runoff if it could find enough evidence that Ruto did not get the 50% plus 1. The court said that it did not find that evidence. It was not satisfied. There was material to warrant that sort of thing. So the decision itself was expected by a lot of people, but since one could not tell which way the court would go, it's felt a relief throughout the country. And so people are now about to go about their business.
And that unanimous decision read by the Chief Justice, Martha Koome, lambasting the allegations made by the Odinga team, saying that it was a red herring and hearsay. What should we read into how the judiciary reads how, albeit a democratic process, it's unfolded the objection to the results?
Well, yes, the Chief Justice used interesting language to dismiss some of the claims by the petitioners. And to some extent, some of the claims sounded far-fetched. But what it was happening was that the petitioners wanted to throw in everything and anything they could think about that somehow might persuade the judges that they have a case. In the process, they made some exaggerated claims that were clearly out of place. And the judges were not amused by some claims. So I guess that's why they went to the extent of saying that some of the assertions were just hot air, to use the language used, or some red herring. It was a weak case. But given what had happened all the way to the day of the announcement, the general mood was that the election was relatively fair, and given that the portal was open to everybody, people could follow the whole thing one by one. There was no secrets about it. That made it very difficult to come up with a different argument. Especially when the judges themselves were following it, like everybody else, and then to come and hear some different claims. So they had to listen to the claims, and some of them did sound and appear to be exaggerated. So that's what they were saying. In future, get some more solid evidence, but not speculate to stretch imagination, because it sounded as if they were stretching imagination.
Now, William Ruto, on the other hand, naturally praising the judgment, also including the Independent Electoral Commission. And just these sentiments coming from him, does it belie the relationship the various arms of government are going to have with the new administration, particularly if we're saying it will and does underpin constitutionalism, the rule of law, and democracy?
One thing about the judgment was that the judges worked very hard to be seen and sound logical. They wanted to be sure that their argument, their reasoning made sense, and to be separated from the perception that had been created in 2017, when it appeared in 2017 that not enough reasons were given for the decision that the judges made at the time. And at the time, the judgment was a split one, not a unanimous. This time, they listened to the argument they did. They gave both sides of the arguments, and then they made their position very clear. So it was a reasonable or a reasoned judgment that people could follow. Does it mean that the judiciary and the executives are going to be hanging together or something like that? No, not necessarily. But there is that feeling that they want to be seen, the judges want to be seen to be independent and to render decisions that cannot be impeached very easily. The appearance of being beholden to either the parliament or the executive is something that the judiciary would want to escape from. And that's why I think they went out of their way to sound reasonable, to give reasons for whatever they decided, not because they were beholden to something. So the judgment itself is not very surprising to a lot of people, but the reasoning, the independence that they try to show, they were actually acquitting themselves. The judges were acquitting themselves in this particular case.
But I wonder, Professor, just in terms of going forward, and if there is a need to mend the reputation of the IEBC against the backdrop of the allegations that were made by 4 of the 7 members of the electoral committees when the election results were read out, that they distanced themselves given what they claimed was the opaque nature or the process that unfolded that declared William Ruto a winner. I was just speaking to a political analyst here in South Africa about political instability here, particularly in Gauteng. He said in politics, the optics are everything. Is that your view? Will there be a need to resuscitate the reputation, the brand of the IEBC, given these allegations? Or will people see that for what it is, a desperate attempt to get one last chance, given the fact that it was Raila Odinga's umpteenth attempt, many would say, just given the political lifespan, to be president?
Well, the IEBC does need some re-examination. I think the judges said that very clearly, that there are internal problems within the IEBC that need to be tightened up, and structural challenges. So there is going to be some rethinking within the IEBC, and the issue of the 4 commissioners who bolted in the last minute. In fact, that bolting in the last minute was part of the undoing of the petition, because people were saying there's something awkward about the whole thing. So whatever it is that led the 4 commissioners to run away from their work in the last minute, 1 hour before the announcement, needs to be looked into and to be rectified. That does not change the position that the judges believe that the election was free and fair, and that the right person was declared the winner at that time. But within the commission itself, it does need some reforms. That is likely to happen within a given time. Once the president is sworn in, and once the parliament is in operation, and the chairman of the commission himself is about to retire in January, so there might be some movement, maybe retire the entire commission and start afresh and get some new commissioners. Okay.
But the extent to which
bad reputation.
The extent to which those reforms are needed, the Chief Justice, on the one hand, calling the IEBC dysfunctional, but talking about the need for far-reaching reforms, but saying it does not render it unable to carry out its work. So if one is on the other end of this outcome, those who are in the Odinga camp who believe that he has been done wrong, given that there was such a narrow margin of the win that he lost this presidency by, just how deep is the work that needs to be done by the IEBC, given what the Chief Justice and the panel of judges had to say?
Well, the narrowness of the electoral outcome in terms of votes is not the problem of the IEBC. That one is outside their mandate or their ability, because the voters' desire. It was a very close election, and everybody knew that. But the dysfunction that the Chief Justice observed was internal to the IEBC, and the quarrels, the fact that it appears that the division within the IEBC was more political than technical, than professional, as to which side some commissioners leaned on. And that, I think that's what made it appear to be dysfunctional, especially towards the end. And Commissioner, the judges raised the question, say, we saw you, you did this as commissioner. And you even said that everything had gone very well. So what is this thing that you're coming up with in the last minute? That's why it looked, it was a political game, so it appeared, and that instead of the commission working as one, then made it dysfunctional. And so the Chief Justice says, you people fix this, or whoever is responsible, fix this. The country does not want to see that again, where you have a commission speaking with different mouths when they should be actually working together. So it did not affect the outcome of the election, one way or the other. And I think the question was raised about whether the delayed in some places affected, and they said no, it did not. The evidence did not point to the functions of the commission being affecting the outcome of the way people would vote.
All right,
the vote
thank you.
was one thing. The failure in the commission was another.